Hey, I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before I get started, I have to give you a legal disclaimer. This podcast isn't legal advice. The Florida Bar Association told me that I had to say this, but nothing is ever going to prevent me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games the disability carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So off we go. Today, I'm going to talk about fibromyalgia and objective medical findings. Now, it doesn't matter to me whether or not you have fibromyalgia or not, because I think there are lots of lessons that you can learn from this podcast about disability carriers' requirement that you have objective medical findings. I'm first going to talk about Unum's use of self-reported subjective medical condition policy language to limit ME/CFS fibromyalgia claims. I'm going to talk about how the First Circuit rejected a CPET exam resulting in a Unum fibromyalgia win. And I'm going to talk about how whether or not your ERISA policy requires that your disability claim be substantiated by significant objective medical findings. Are you ready to go? Well, before we do that, let's take a quick break because we've got a lot of information to share with you today. Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. Does your ERISA policy or plan require that your disability claim be substantiated by significant objective medical findings? Disability carriers and plans don't make it easy for you to get the disability benefits you deserve. And one of the ways they do that is by writing the policy or plan language in a way that makes it hard for you to prove your entitlement to benefits. An example of this is found in the language of Fedex disability plans. Now, I absolutely hate Fedex's disability plan. They're not, quite frankly, in my opinion, interested in really providing their employees with disability benefits. And quite frankly, I think if you can use a different delivery service, go at it. It's a convoluted plan, and it requires a FedEx employee to have an occupational disability. What on earth is that? Well, they define it as the inability of a covered employee because of a medically determinable physical impairment or mental impairment to perform the duties of their regular occupation. There are lots of words in this definition, but the words get worse. The disability has to be substantiated by significant objective findings, which are defined as signs that are noted on a test or medical examination and which are considered anatomically, physiologically, or psychological abnormalities that can be observed apart from your individual symptoms. Another bunch of words that they will use to deny your claim. Now, the burden of proof is on the FedEx employee to substantiate their disability. Let me tell you the case of Mason versus FedEx. And I think it illustrates the almost impossible to prove standard of disability, even in the most compelling cases. Mason had worked at FedEx as a handler, non-DOT warehouse worker, and was required to lift and maneuver packages of 50 pounds. She claimed she was disabled because of complications from numerous procedures caused by scar tissue that formed after she had breast reduction surgery. She'd undergone a bilateral reduction mammoplasty that had caused scarring. In an effort to relieve the pain and tightness by the scarring, she had undergone numerous surgical, laser, and radiation treatments. The FedEx plan paid benefits for a couple months, and then they denied benefits because there was no functional impairment. Mason provided her medical records that documented her consistent pain complaints and her medical treatment. Her doctors opined that she couldn't lift her arms or do any lifting over 5 pounds. So Aetna, who was the plan administrator for FedEx, had her file reviewed by 4 liar-for-hire medical doctors. They all concluded she didn't offer objective evidence of functional impairment. The scars weren't good enough. The medical records, the medical providers, all of whom were men, acknowledged but rejected the opinions of Mason's treating physicians. They all said she could do the lifting required. Now, one would think as a matter of common sense, that scar tissue would impact a person's ability to lift and cause pain and tightness in the chest area. She did have full range of motion in her arms, and she didn't have any motor weakness of her arms. So the Aetna doctor said, look, there's no subjective medical findings. Now, there isn't a lot of testing that you can do to establish that the scar tissue is causing impingement in the chest area. I mean, it just doesn't exist. When the case ended up in federal court, the judge agreed and upheld the denial. And you can see, as a matter of common sense, that a person can have difficulty moving their arms out in front of them, have difficulty lifting, not necessarily because of problems with their arms, but because of the area in the chest, the front of the shoulders, over the breastbone. But because there's no objective way to test for that, the judge said, oh, well, you didn't meet the definition of disability because there's no significant objective medical findings that have been noted on testing, because there isn't any, or medical examination, because you necessarily wouldn't find any, and which are considered anatomical, physiological, or psychological abnormalities that are observed apart from the individual symptoms. I'm wondering whether the results in this case would have been different if she had undergone what's called a functional capacity evaluation, because it could have been an objective medical finding that could have been endorsed by her treating physician. But of course, we'll never know. I hope that you've enjoyed this week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. If you enjoyed this episode, consider liking the page, leaving a review, or sharing it with your friends and family. Also, subscribe to this podcast. That way, you're going to be notified every time a new episode comes out. I hope you tune in for next week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy.